Hello, BookTube. We're down in puppy territory again. We're going to continue with our impromptu but apparently popular tour of the Penguin Classics basement shelf. It's the shelf at the very bottom of the big central Penguin Classic bookcase, and the books here are double and triple stacked because they're mass market paperbacks. And I just don't have the affection for mass market paperbacks that I used to have. I like the experience of reading a nice, generous trade paperback much better. So I got rid of a lot of my Penguin Classics that really, years ago, I got rid of a lot of them that really meant very little to me, and I kept a core collection of them that I haven't got rid of yet, just because I either haven't found a really nice trade paperback to replace it with, or because it has sentimental value, or maybe tons of notes that I haven't got around to transcribing yet. So we're going to do the next stack, the back stack of those. Starting with this. This is a translation by Paul Foot of A Hero of Our Time by Lermontov. A Russian novel that has never quite appealed to me. This author has never quite appealed to me in the way that I think he should. Probably, I very much get the impression that that the failures here have been the translator's fault. Certainly because the English language translations of Lermontov that I've read have never matched up with the ecstatic responses to him by intelligent critics that I respect. So I guess I'm waiting for for a whole bunch of new translations, and they'll come. And the thing about restraining my book buying habits, and the thing about downsizing my personal library, and the thing about Penguin Classics is that when they come, they'll come to me in the mail. I won't need to go hunting in used bookstores for where all these things were bought. So the next one is Harold Isabel's translation of The Last Poets of Imperial Rome. And this is a collection of Latin verse translated into English from the 2nd to 5th centuries in all parts of the Roman Empire, not just Rome, not just Italy. A whole bunch of poets that most people have never heard of. Translated here either in whole or in part, and with really good biographical stuff. There's really good supporting scholarship in this volume. It's never going to be made into a trade paperback, I don't think. So I'm going to hold on to this one. Okay, then a battered old mass market paperback of Middlemarch by George Eliot. That is the painting on the cover is The Pathway to the Village Church by Thomas Creswick, and it's not exactly the perfect cover that I would choose for this book, but it does connote Middlemarch. I mean, again, I have this, and I have the Alex Ross Superman bookmark, but I don't imagine myself ever. I have many other editions of Middlemarch, and I don't imagine myself ever reading this mass market. Part of me always thinks in a quasi-romantic way that if I travel, if I embark on long travels, then I will need these mass markets, but I'm not going to do that. So the next one is Polybius. This is The Rise of the Roman Empire. This is a translation by Ian Scott Kilvert, who did a lot of translations for Penguin Classics a long time ago. And this author is really enjoyable to read. I don't know if I have a trade paperback of this. This is just something that I would wait for, because he's one of the. It looks like we're hitting a vein of the classics of ancient Greece and Rome. He's one of the historians of ancient Rome that is lesser well known to the general reading public, and really interesting, especially the more you know your Tacitus and Livy, the more interesting he gets. But then we have Peter Green's translation of the erotic poems of Ovid, which has a great introduction and great notes. There is not the slightest tiny squeak of eroticism in Peter Green's translations here. They don't bear any resemblance to the poems that Ovid wrote, and maybe they couldn't. Maybe that's not a fault of Peter Green, who's a great classicist, great guy, great translator. Maybe it's just either A, you're working for Penguin Classics, so you're not going to do these things in the flame-throwingly erotic original, or B, you can't quite make it work. You can't quite bring it across into English without thoroughly distorting it. I don't know, one way or another. Ovid is a big favorite of mine, and the erotic poems to put it mildly, I have never read an accurate translation of them, not even close. Oh goodness, goodness. Okay, well, this thing's got schmutz all over it, probably from when it was originally bought. Isn't that terrible? It probably had some sort of sticker on it when I originally bought it. But this is ages ago. This is the Ethics of Aristotle, in a Penguin Classic translation by J.A.K. Thompson. I would be willing to bet that I've only read this once, if I have. The Ethics of Aristotle I like mainly for non-Aristotelian reasons. I like it for all of the secondary stuff that philosophy wonks ignore, the literary references, the historical references. That I read it for that, not really for his musings on ethics. Okay. Now see, this is E.V. Ryu's translation of The Voyage of the Argo by Apollonius of Rhodes, and I have many other better versions of this. This is just a Penguin Classic that, again, I know this tour is going to devolve frequently into just me complaining about the things that Penguin doesn't do, but you can picture a beautiful Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition, maybe with black and white spot illustrations, of The Voyage of the Argo. Might not necessarily be Ryu's translation. I bet you could get somebody else's. But everybody knows the story of Jason and the Argonauts, or some variation of it, and the people who don't will be amazed that any saga from ancient Greece could be so good. It's so entertaining, so interesting. Why isn't there a Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition of The Voyage of the Argo? I have no idea. Oh, well, you can interrupt pretty much any video, can't you? Well, the little Fraulein is on the bed, and I'm on the floor, so our positions are reversed. The hunter has become the hunted. So what's next? Oh God, another philosopher. This is The Republic of Plato. This is a translation by Desmond Lee. Does it look good to you? If Plato looks good to you, I have not taught you well. my little biscuit. How's my little Fraulein? This is just I have other versions of Plato, and I don't think I would ever read an English language translation of Plato again. Okay, well, this is at least not a classic. This is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Stories by Robert Louis Stevenson in a Penguin mass market. And again, as far as I know, Penguin has never done a big, nice trade paperback of the collected nonfiction of Robert Louis Stevenson. His collections of essays and little autobiographical sketches. I don't think they've ever done the bulk of his travel writing. There's a South Seas volume, but what about Travels with a Donkey? I don't know if that exists in a Penguin Classic trade paperback. And what about a big 1,000-page Penguin Classic trade paperback of the collected stories of Robert Louis Stevenson? Not just short stories, but all the novellas as well, including Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. What about that? What about a nice big Stevenson volume? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Okay, then we have a mass market. I think we've seen a few of these before. This is a mass market Peter Wiggum translation of the poems of Catullus. A nice mass market paperback that I bought. It looks like 30 years ago. That really does. It reads like 1960s British poetry. It doesn't read like Catullus. It doesn't read like a representative version of Catullus. It just feels like, I mean, that's the approach that you have to do with translating poetry, especially, but translating anything from the ancient world. You have to, translators say it over and over again in their translator prefaces. They say, well, you've got two choices here. I can either try to convey the most accurate translation, word for word, line by line, of Catullus, no matter what the mess is that results in English, or I can take the poem, mull it around in my mind, and try to produce a very accurate but English version of that poem. And I don't know, I can't help but think that there is a better marriage of those two extremes than most translators of the ancient classics actually use. I don't know one way or another. I've only translated one ancient classic myself, one fraction of one ancient classic. A friend of mine asked me to translate Suetonius' Life of Tiberius, and I did. And encountered a lot of these problems and just fixed them. I often wonder if the reason why so many English language translations of the classics bother me isn't because the classics are hard to translate, but because the translators haven't done enough reading in English. Haven't done enough reading of great English poetry or great English novelists. I don't know. I don't know one way or another. Okay, this next volume is by Maxwell Staniforth, and it is a collection of translations of early Christian writings. In perfect condition. I must have got this when there used to be a Penguin bookstore here across the river in Cambridge, and I used to work there, and I worked their closing sale. When they went out of business, they had a closing sale with the most Byzantine price markdowns you've ever seen, and I worked that closing sale and just came away with satchels full of Penguin classics. But this is who all is going to be in here. Yeah, this is the Epistle of Barnabas, the Epistle of Diognetus, the Polycarp, the Martyrdom of Polycarp. This will be a whole bunch of stuff that will be familiar to Christian scholars, but I don't know that I would read it again for pleasure. I have no idea. Okay, this is another one that's not translated. It was written in English, although it doesn't read that way. It reads like a bad translation. This is The Shadow Line by Joseph Conrad, tiny little novella of his. That I liked. In fact, I very much like the Penguin version. There's a little Penguin version, there's a little Oxford version. I don't know that I have the Oxford version anymore. The Penguin version is probably all I have. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, my. All right. This is an English language translation by Margaret Shaw of the Rouge et Noir, the Scarlet and the Black by Stendhal. A great, great novel. I seem to remember reading this translation and finding it a little galumphy, which Stendhal never is, so I don't know. I guess maybe I'm holding on to this because I don't think I have any newer Stendhal. I think I have this translation by Margaret Shaw in a trade paperback, but not anything newer. He's kind of ripe for rediscovery by some translator. All right, here's another one with schmutz on the cover, but this is a classic. Well, they all are. They're Penguin classics, but this is the literal. This is, in terms of subsequent sales and reprint life, this thing has been reprinted more than almost any other book this side of the Bible or Old Farmer's Almanac or whatever. This is Gilbert White's Natural History of Selborne in the Penguin edition with lavishly affectionate notes. This is the notes in this really got to me. I don't know. What have we got here? There's a postcard in here. This is from the Church of San Felipe in Mexico. This is I have a few editions of this, and I also know the edition that I want. I actually saw it a few years ago at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. There's an old hardcover, dust-jacketed edition of the Natural History of Selborne with black and white photos from, it must be now 130 years ago, and that's the one I want. And the thing about the Brattle Bookshop is if I wait long enough, it will show up there. so I'll hold on to this until I have it. Oh my, oh goodness gracious, oh my. Okay, this is the Betty Radis translation of The Praise of Folly by Erasmus. That's our guy on the cover, and this copy has been everywhere with me. Just, it's battered all to heck and gone. Oh my. Okay. And this is one of the ones that has annotations and all sorts of stuff that I haven't transferred. I have larger trade paperbacks of this that are more conducive to reading. I just haven't transferred my notes, and then once I do, there'll be no reason to keep this book. This is, of course, satirical and very light on its feet, but it is exhaustively familiar with a lot of these people. Erasmus read everything, knew everything. Okay, well, this is from the Penguin Shakespeare Library. It's not actually a Penguin classic. It's just here with my penguins. This is by John Russell Brown. This is Shakespeare's plays in performance. Lots and lots of great stuff here. The Penguin did a whole Shakespeare library of volumes like this, of just essays and reflections on Shakespeare, problem plays, history plays, comedy in Shakespeare. This one is Shakespeare in performance, or Shakespeare's working life. There were a whole bunch. It was a whole string of books. Really, really well chosen stuff. I'm glad I have this. I don't know what it's doing down here. And then this next one is really small. Oh, okay, small but powerful. This is the Penguin Classic of Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Just those of you who know colonial American history will already know, but those of you who don't know, maybe have never read this book. It did as much as any printed work could possibly do to make this country. The effect that it had, the widespread effect that it had on everyone, everywhere, would be difficult to overstate. There's a history of this book. I'm sure there are histories that have been written, but the history of this book reads like a novel on its own. This was Thomas Paine hiring out his pen to write about the American cause when the American cause was far from a given. It was far from accepted. And he wrote it at white heat, printed it at white heat, and it was in everybody's hand. It was on everybody's lips. Just an incredible, incredible piece of propaganda, pamphlet of propaganda. I'm glad that I have it. I don't know that I have. See, again, I could easily picture a big fat Penguin volume of Thomas Paine, not just Common Sense, but a bunch of other stuff. There's a bunch of, Paine was a great writer. He wrote fantastically gripping prose, no matter what subject he picked. And most of him has no popular edition at the moment. Most of him hasn't had popular editions in forever. Common Sense, yes, will always have a reprint life of its own. But there are a bunch of other things, and they're incredibly good to read. A nice big fat volume of Thomas Paine would be really great. And that's it. That is the next shelf here of these Penguin Classics. We're going to just keep going on. The Penguin basement has lots of books in it, so we have still a lot to do. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll keep going. You seem to like this, so I'll keep going. I'll do this basement shelf. It'd be fun anyway to see these books after so long. They usually get ignored in favor of all the upper shelves. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.